While I was finally savoring my first approved break in 4 years on a quiet Santorini terrace, my father-in-law, the CEO, called and sneered. "Do you think you've earned this? Taking trips while others carry your load. If laziness were a title, you'd finally qualify. Don't bother coming back." I smiled, ended the call, and clinked glasses with the stranger beside me, the CEO of our biggest rival. When I returned home, chaos erupted. They say you should never mix family and business. But what if that toxic mix didn't just ruin your career or your marriage, but almost got you killed? And then, they tried to frame you for a federal crime? That was my life. I was there, in the polished executive conference room, on a Tuesday morning. Me, in my usual back corner seat, trying to be invisible. And Cole Blackwood, my father-in-law, at the head of the table in his perfectly tailored suit. He was soaking up the applause, these board members clapping like he just saved the world. But I watched him, and I couldn't breathe. Not really. "Gentlemen," he boomed, because he always said gentlemen, even though 3 brilliant women sat in that room. "We've secured the Lansing contract. 42 million in revenue. We beat Meridian Dynamics by underbidding them by 40%. My pen dug into my notepad so hard it tore right through the paper. 40%. I'd modeled that bid 6 different ways. Every single scenario screamed the same terrifying result: we'd lose money. The margins couldn't support the timeline. Just 3 weeks ago, I'd handed Cole a 12-page risk analysis, walked him through every chart, every projection. He'd glanced at it for maybe 30 seconds, then tossed it onto his desk with a dismissive wave. "You think too small, Avery," he'd scoffed. "This is how you crush competition." And now, he stood there, accepting praise, a living monument to his own arrogance, for a decision that was about to bleed Blackwood Manufacturing dry. Across the table, my husband, Garrett, caught my eye. His jaw was tight, and he gave me that tiny, familiar shake of his head. "Don't question Dad. Not now, not ever." 4 years. 4 years of working 70-hour weeks, doing CFO-level strategy for a senior analyst's salary. 4 years of Cole's name plastered on every press release, while I was the invisible architect behind every financial win. 4 years of watching men take credit for my work. 4 years of making myself smaller and smaller, desperately hoping someone would finally see my value. That morning, watching Cole celebrate a contract that I knew would prove me right, I had a crushing realization. They did see my value. They just had no intention of paying for it. And when I finally took my first vacation in 4 years, 10 days, requested 4 months in advance, approved in writing, Cole Blackwood called me in Santorini and fired me for abandoning my responsibilities. He thought he was ending my career. He had no idea he just set me free. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That Tuesday morning, in the conference room, I sat in stunned silence while Cole finished his victory speech. The board member stood, shaking his hand, clapping him on the shoulder. My analysis, the one that showed we'd lose at least $3 million on that contract, was probably still sitting on his desk, buried under golf magazines and industry awards with his name engraved on them. Garrett caught my eye as everyone filed out. He walked over, loosening his tie, that careful, almost guarded expression on his face, an expression I'd learned to read over 4 years of marriage. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't start with the 'I told you so.' Dad's happy. The board's happy. Just let it be." I closed my notepad, the torn page crinkling under my fingers. "Garrett, we're going to lose money on this contract. Millions. The execution timeline alone, Avery." His voice dropped lower, almost a warning. "Dad's been doing this for 30 years. He knows what he's doing. I ran the numbers. You ran projections. Dad operates in the real world." He glanced toward the door where Cole was still talking to board members, then back at me. "Look, I know you work hard. Everyone knows that. But you need to trust that the people with more experience know what they're doing." The people with more experience. Not him specifically. Not Cole. Just the vague category of people who weren't me. I picked up my notepad and laptop. "I have work to do." I said it, but I was already walking out, past Cole and his admirers, past the conference room where I'd sat in the back corner for 4 years, waiting for someone to ask my opinion instead of just taking my work. My office was on the 3rd floor, a small interior room with no windows, a desk barely big enough for my dual monitors. Senior Financial Analyst. That's what the title on my business card said. That's what my salary reflected, too, $78,000 a year in a city where studio apartments started at $2,500 a month. I did CFO work. I built financial models that guided million-dollar decisions, restructured supplier contracts, identified cost savings, projected growth scenarios. But the title stayed the same, and so did the pay, because I wasn't a Blackwood by blood. I'd walked into that building 4 years ago as Garrett's fiancé, a Wharton MBA with a leather portfolio, and enough naivete to believe competence mattered more than last names. Cole had shaken my hand at our engagement dinner, that iron grip of his, and said, "We could use someone with your brain around here, Avery. This family values intelligence." I believed him. I believed that my financial acumen would be rewarded, that my strategic thinking would earn me a seat at the table, that eventually, the work would speak for itself. It did speak. Just not in my voice. Every strategy one built became our approach in Cole's presentations. Every cost-saving measure I identified became the leadership team's initiative in company-wide emails. My risk analyses were summarized into bullet points and presented by Garrett to the board. Stripped of my name, my nuance, my warnings. I sat down at my desk and opened the Lansing contract file. The numbers were still there, stark and undeniable. At the bid price Cole had submitted, 40% below market rate, we'd barely cover materials costs. Labor would push us into the red. Any delays, any unexpected complications, and we'd be hemorrhaging money. But Cole didn't care about my projections. He cared about beating Meridian Dynamics, about the press release that would say Blackwood Manufacturing had undercut their biggest competitor. I stared at my screen until the numbers blurred. That evening I stayed late. The third floor emptied out by 6, but I was still there at 8, building contingency models for when the Lansing contract started losing money. And when it did, someone would need a plan to stop the bleeding. That someone would be me. The credit, of course, would go to someone else. Garrett texted at 9. "Working late again?" I typed back. "Finishing projections. Don't stay too late. You need rest." Rest. As if sleep was the problem. As if exhaustion was something I could fix with 8 hours and a good pillow, instead of the systematic erasure of my contributions. I got home at 10:30. Garrett was already asleep, or pretending to be. We'd stopped sleeping in the same rhythm months ago. Him in bed by 10. Me stumbling in after midnight. Both of us too tired, or too distant, to bridge the gap. I brushed my teeth in the en-suite bathroom, looking at my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. Hair pulled back in the same utilitarian ponytail I wore every day. The woman looking back at me seemed smaller than she should be, like I'd been compressing myself for so long, I'd forgotten my original shape. The house was quiet. Our Brooklyn townhouse, bought with Blackwood money before we'd even gotten married. Garrett's name on the deed. I paid half the mortgage from my $78,000 salary. He paid the other half from his director-level income that was nearly double mine, even though his primary job seemed to be presenting my work to his father. I climbed into bed, on my side, the left side, the side I claimed 4 years ago and never moved from. Garrett didn't stir. Somewhere between our wedding and our second anniversary, we'd stopped being partners. We'd become roommates who shared a mortgage, occasional meals, and increasingly less conversation. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about the Lansing contract, and Cole's dismissal of my analysis, and Garrett's warning not to make waves. For years, I'd given this family everything. 4 years of 70-hour weeks. 4 years of invisible labor. 4 years of watching my name disappear from my own work. And for what? The email arrived 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday night. I was working from the kitchen island, laptop open, mug of chamomile tea going cold beside me. Garrett was upstairs watching something on his iPad, the sound of explosions and dramatic music filtering down through the ceiling. Subject line, updated benefit information. I almost deleted it. Almost. But something made me pause. Maybe the timestamp, sent at 9:14 p.m., long after Margaret in HR usually went home. Maybe the small voice that had been whispering warnings I'd trained myself to ignore. I opened it. My life insurance policy had been increased from $3 million to $18 million. Effective immediately. $18 million. I read it 3 times. No explanation, no prior discussion, just a clinical paragraph in corporate font notifying me that Blackwood Manufacturing now valued my death at 6 times what they'd valued it 3 months ago. My hands were shaking as I opened my calendar, scrolling back through project completions and milestones. The policy increase was dated March 18th. March 18th was 3 days after I'd finalized the supplier contract renegotiations that saved Blackwood $6 million in annual costs. 3 days. The knot in my stomach that had been tightening for months suddenly had a shape. A name. A cold, mathematical logic that made my chest constrict. I grabbed my laptop and walked upstairs. Garrett was propped against the headboard, iPad on his lap, barely glancing up as I came in. "Garrett, did you know about this?" I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing him the email. He squinted at it, then shrugged. "Life insurance. That's just HR stuff. Standard benefits. My policy was increased to $18 million. Okay." He looked back at his iPad. "That's good, isn't it? Means the company values you, Values me? The irony was so sharp, I almost laughed. Did anyone else get an increase? I don't know, Avery. I don't handle HR benefits. His tone was dismissive, distracted. If you're worried about it, talk to Margaret. I did. The next morning, I went down to the third-floor HR office, a cramped room with filing cabinets and a desk where Margaret had sat for 23 years, watching Blackwood children grow into Blackwood executives. Margaret, I need to ask about my life insurance. She looked up from her computer, and something flickered across her face. Discomfort, maybe guilt. Your policy? Yes. Mr. Blackwood authorized the increase last month. Why? She shuffled papers on her desk, not meeting my eyes. He said it was standard for executives performing high-value work. I'm not an executive. You perform executive-level responsibilities. The words sounded rehearsed. Did anyone else receive an increase? Her hand stilled. The silence stretched. Margaret, I'm not at liberty to discuss other employees' benefits. Avery, I'm sorry. I left her office with my heart pounding, that knot in my stomach pulling tighter and tighter until I thought I might be sick. 18 million. 3 days after saving the company 6 million. And 2 weeks later, Cole Blackwood called me into his office and gave me my first operational audit assignment. Cole's office was mahogany and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. I stood in front of his desk on a Friday afternoon in late May, hands clasped in front of me, waiting while he finished an email. He didn't look up for 2 full minutes. When he finally did, his expression was neutral, businesslike. I need you to do a safety walkthrough at the Dunham facility. Tuesday evening, second shift. I frowned. Isn't that operations' responsibility? You're always talking about cost efficiency. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I want a financial perspective on whether we're overinvesting in safety protocols. Fresh eyes. Something about it felt wrong. But I said yes because that's what I always did. The Dunham plant was 30 years old. All concrete and exposed metal, machinery that roared and clanged in rhythms that felt aggressive. I walked the floor alone for 3 hours with a clipboard and steel-toed boots that kept slipping on oil-slicked concrete. A forklift came so close I felt the wind from it. The driver didn't even turn his head. 2 weeks later, Cole sent me to Somerset. Midnight inventory check. I walked catwalks with railings that shifted under my grip, trying not to look at the concrete 20 feet below. Then Lexington, the chemical storage facility where I spent an hour breathing fumes before someone finally noticed the ventilation had malfunctioned. I came home shaking that night, lungs burning, and Garrett was on the couch, scrolling his phone. How was it? He asked without looking up. I think I inhaled something toxic. Dad says you're doing great work on these audits. A month later, I collapsed in the office bathroom. Their doctors ran every test, found nothing. Probably stress, they said. You should take a vacation. So I did. I submitted the request 4 months in advance, 10 days in Santorini late. September, timed perfectly after the quarterly close so no one could say I was being irresponsible. I routed it through HR, copied Cole and Garrett, attached my project timeline showing everything would be covered. Cole approved it with a single-sentence reply, fine. Make sure everything's handled. I spent 3 weeks training Jordan, a junior analyst who was eager but inexperienced. I created a 60-page transition document, step-by-step instructions, contact lists, contingency protocols for every active project. I scheduled daily check-in calls. I color-coded spreadsheets. I did everything except clone myself. Garrett had barely reacted when I told him about the trip. You're going alone? It wasn't a question, really, just an observation delivered in that flat tone he used for everything lately. You're welcome to come, I said even though I didn't mean it. I can't take time off right now. Dad needs me here. Of course he did. We hadn't shared a bed in 6 months. Hadn't had a real conversation in longer than that. I'd stopped expecting him to ask about my day, my work, my life. We existed in parallel routines, him leaving for the office before I woke up, me coming home long after he'd eaten dinner alone. The morning I left for Logan Airport, I stood in our kitchen with my suitcase packed, waiting for something I couldn't name. A goodbye. Maybe a hug. Some acknowledgement that I was leaving for 10 days. But Garrett had already gone to work. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. Santorini hit me like oxygen after years of holding my breath. The light was different, golden and impossibly soft, nothing like Boston's perpetual gray. I stayed at a small cliffside hotel in Hawaii, run by a woman named Katerina, who brought fresh yogurt and honey to my terrace every morning and never asked why I was traveling alone. I spent the first 2 days crying. Ugly, heaving sobs on my private terrace, overlooking the caldera, mourning a version of myself I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten she existed. The woman who'd graduated Wharton with honors and ambitions. The woman who'd believed competence mattered more than last names. The woman who thought marriage meant partnership. By day 3, something shifted. I started breathing differently, deeper, slower, like my lungs were remembering their actual capacity. I walked the narrow cobblestone streets with no destination. Ate grilled octopus at tiny tavernas where no one knew my name. Drank a Surtico that tasted like minerals and salt and freedom. I didn't check my work email. Not once. Garrett sent one text on day 2, "Hope you got there safe." I didn't respond. On day 4, I was sitting on the hotel terrace at sunset, watching the sky turn shades of amber and rose I didn't have names for. A glass of wine in my hand when the woman at the next table turned to me. She was older, late 50s maybe, with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into an elegant knot and oversized sunglasses that somehow made her look more sophisticated instead of hidden. "You have the look of someone who just remembered she's allowed to exist," she said. I laughed, surprised by the sound of it. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there." She gestured to the empty chair at her table. "Join me." Her name was Wyatt Brennan, and she had the kind of presence that made you sit straighter without realizing it. Not intimidating, exactly, but commanding in a way that felt earned rather than performed. We talked about Greece, about travel, about the particular magic of Santorini light. Safe topics. Easy topics. Then my phone started buzzing on the table. Cole's name flashed across the screen. Once. Twice. 3 times. I ignored it. Wyatt raised an eyebrow. "Someone's persistent." "My father-in-law. CEO of the company I work for." I picked up my wine glass, watching the liquid catch the fading sunlight. "He doesn't believe in boundaries. Family business, in-laws business. I just work there." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. The phone buzzed again. 4th call. Wyatt tilted her head. "You going to answer that?" Something in her tone, curiosity, maybe, or just the permission of a stranger who had no stake in my choices, made me pick up the phone. I should have let it go to voicemail. "Hello?" Cole's voice exploded through the speaker, so loud that Wyatt could hear it clearly. So loud that the couple 3 tables away turned to look. "Do you think you deserve this? Taking vacations while others carry your weight? You've been gone 3 days and the Lansing contract is imploding because you weren't here to clean up the mess." 4 years of conditioning made me respond automatically, voice steady even as my heart raced. "Cole, I left a 60-page transition document. I trained Jordan for 3 weeks. Everything is covered. Jordan is incompetent. You're the one who runs the numbers. Avery, you're the CFO." Something cracked inside me. Something that had been bending for 4 years under the weight of invisible labor and stolen credit and salary reviews that never came. "I'm the senior financial analyst who does CFO-level work for half the salary and 0 credit," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "And I'm on an approved vacation." Silence on the other end. The dangerous kind. Then his voice came back, quiet and venomous. "If laziness were a job title, you'd finally be qualified. Don't bother coming back. You're fired." The line went dead. I sat there, holding my phone, staring at the darkening caldera. And I felt something strange wash over me. Not devastation. Not fear. Relief. Then I started laughing. It started small, a shocked exhale, and built into something bigger, wilder, more liberating than anything I'd felt in 4 years. The kind of laughter that comes from a place so deep you'd forgotten it existed. Wyatt was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She raised her wine glass, lips curving into a knowing smile. "To liberation," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, still laughing, feeling lighter than I had in years. "To liberation." We ordered another bottle of wine and watched the sun finish setting, painting the white buildings of Hawaii in shades of pink and gold. And then I started talking. I told her things I'd never said out loud. How Cole dangled the CFO title like bait for 4 years, while taking credit for every strategy one built. How Garrett had slowly morphed from partner to puppet, echoing his father's dismissals. How I'd saved Blackwood $6 million in supplier negotiations and been told I was too emotional for leadership. How my life insurance policy had been increased to $18 million 3 days after that save. How Cole had started sending me on solo audits to facilities with broken equipment. How I'd collapsed from chemical fumes and been told to take a vacation, this vacation, that he'd approved without hesitation after blocking my requests for 2 years. Wyatt listened without interrupting, sipping her wine, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern to something harder. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a matte black business card. "Wyatt Brennan," she said, sliding it across the table. "CEO of Meridian Dynamics." The name registered like a physical impact. Meridian Dynamics. Blackwood Manufacturing's biggest competitor. The company Cole had spent 5 years trying to crush, underbidding on contracts, poaching clients, bad-mouthing in industry circles. I heard the whole conversation, Wyatt said. And I'm going to make you an offer. We're opening a new East Coast division. We need a CFO who understands industrial manufacturing. Someone who knows the players, the pitfalls, how to build sustainable growth instead of reckless empire. She paused. Someone who actually takes vacations. I stared at the card. At the embossed logo. At the phone number that felt like a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. My phone buzzed. Garrett. Dad's furious. What did you do? Not are you okay? Not what happened? Just what did you do? Like I'd committed some unforgivable sin by answering my phone on my approved vacation. I picked up the phone, held the power button until the screen went dark, and looked at Wyatt. Tell me more. We stayed on that terrace until the stars came out, until the tourists thinned and the restaurants along the cliff began closing their outdoor seating, the staff stacking chairs and wiping down tables with tired efficiency. Wyatt told me about Meridian Dynamics over that second bottle of wine. How she built it from a mid-sized regional player into a national competitor by focusing on sustainable manufacturing practices and treating employees like assets to develop rather than resources to exploit. We don't win by underbidding and bleeding out on execution, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. We win by building relationships with clients who value quality over cost-cutting. It's slower growth, but it's real. Everything she described was the opposite of Cole's approach. I told her I'd think about it. She smiled like she already knew my answer. Take your time. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. When you're ready, call me. We had dinner 3 more times over the next week, at different tavernas perched on the cliffs, over fresh fish and Greek salads and conversations that felt like a strange hybrid of therapy and strategic planning. She never pressured me, never made the job offer feel transactional. She just talked about what Meridian was building and let me imagine myself as part of it. On my last night in Santorini, we met at a small restaurant in Phoenicia, away from the tourist crowds. The owner brought us grilled sea bass and roasted vegetables without us ordering, like Wyatt was a regular. After dessert, baklava and strong Greek coffee, she handed me a leather folder embossed with Meridian's logo. Background reading, she said. Details on the CFO role, compensation structure, team you'd be building. She paused, sliding the folder across the table. And some industry intelligence on Blackwood you might find interesting. No pressure. Just information. The folder was thick, substantial. I tucked it into my carry-on bag, promising to read it on the flight home. That night, lying in my hotel bed with the terrace doors open and the sound of the Aegean drifting in, I finally checked my email. I'd been offline for 9 days. 9 days of silence from Blackwood Manufacturing, from my marriage, from the life I'd left behind in Boston. 73 unread messages. I scrolled through them with a sick feeling in my stomach. 15 from Cole. The subject lines escalated, urgent Lansing contract, to unacceptable behavior, to final warning, even though I'd already been fired. 12 from Garrett. Each one colder and more clipped than the last. Where are you? Dad's furious. You need to call. This is embarrassing. You're being selfish. Not once did he ask if I was okay. 3 emails from Diane, Cole's wife, all with subject lines about family loyalty and disappointing everyone who believed in you. And one from Sloane, Garrett's younger sister, sent 2 days ago. Avery, I'm so sorry about Dad. I don't know what happened, but I know it's not your fault. Call me when you're home. I miss you. I stared at that last email for a long time. Sloane was the only Blackwood who'd ever treated me like family instead of staff. She was younger, 26 to my 32, an art history major who'd been told by Cole that business school is for serious people like Garrett. She'd always been on the periphery of the family empire, decorative but not functional. We'd bonded over that shared invisibility. I didn't respond to any of the emails. Just closed my laptop and tried to sleep. The flight from Athens to Boston was 9 hours. I waited until we were cruising at altitude, the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers sleeping or watching movies on their seatback screens, before I opened Wyatt's folder. The first section was what I expected: job description, salary range, equity package, benefits, all of it generous, professional, exactly what a CFO role should offer. The second section made my hands start shaking. It was a comprehensive analysis of Blackwood Manufacturing's financial health, compiled by Meridian's strategic intelligence team. Not corporate espionage. Everything was sourced from public filings, industry reports, supplier networks, and workforce data that any competent analyst could access. But put together, it was devastating. 9 contracts currently losing money. Not just Lansing, 8 others I'd flagged as risky over the past 2 years, contracts Cole had pushed through despite my warnings. Underbidding to steal market share without regard for execution costs. Deferred maintenance creating OSHA violations across 4 facilities. Equipment breakdowns increasing. Safety incidents trending upward. Supplier contracts renegotiated at terms that squeezed smaller partners to breaking point. 3 had already gone under, 2 more were on the edge. Workforce turnover at 34%, double the industry average. Exit interview data showing employees leaving because of toxic leadership and unsustainable workloads. Meridian's analysts had modeled Blackwood's cash flow based on these public indicators. Their projection? Insolvency within 18 months unless the company secured a major capital infusion or drastically restructured operations. I was reading about the slow-motion collapse of the company I'd spent 4 years trying to save. Then I reached the appendix, executive compensation and benefits. A breakdown of salary, bonuses, equity, and insurance policies for Blackwood's leadership team. My life insurance policy wasn't the only one that had been increased, but it was the largest, $18 million, up from $3 million, authorized by Cole Blackwood 9 months ago. I checked the date, March 18th. 3 weeks after I'd finalized the supplier contract renegotiations that saved Blackwood $6 million in annual costs. The same month Cole had started sending me on operational audits. My coffee cup sat untouched on the tray table, going cold while I stared at that date. I pulled out my phone, still in airplane mode, and opened my calendar, scrolling back through the past 9 months with trembling fingers. March 18th, life insurance increased. April 3rd, first operational audit, Dunham facility, evening shift, alone. April 17th, Somerset warehouse, midnight inventory, alone. May 8th, Lexington chemical plant, where the ventilation had malfunctioned. May 22nd, ER visit after collapsing in the office bathroom. Doctors found nothing. I cross-referenced each audit date with my work calendar. Every single one had been scheduled within 2 weeks of a major financial when I delivered for Blackwood. Dunham came after I'd identified cost savings in the production line. Somerset came after I'd restructured the logistics contracts. Lexington came after I'd caught an accounting error that would have triggered an audit. Each time I made the company money, Cole sent me somewhere dangerous. The pattern was there, stark and undeniable, and I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before. Or maybe I had seen it. Maybe that knot in my stomach, that voice whispering warnings, had been seeing it all along. But 4 years of gaslighting had taught me not to trust my own instincts. I thought about true crime podcasts I'd listened to on my commute, stories about life insurance policies and convenient accidents, about people who disappeared during routine work assignments. I thought about that forklift at Dunham, how close it had come, how the driver's face had been obscured by shadows and he never even turned his head. I thought about the railing at Somerset that had shifted under my grip while I stood alone on a catwalk 20 feet above concrete. I thought about breathing chemical fumes for an hour at Lexington while the ventilation system was malfunctioning, and how no one had noticed until I'd already collapsed. I thought about the doctors finding nothing wrong and telling me I just needed rest. Rest. A vacation. A vacation Cole had blocked for 2 years until suddenly, 4 months ago, he'd approved 10 days in Greece without hesitation. Almost eagerly. Like he wanted me gone. Or like he expected I wouldn't be coming back. The plane hit turbulence, and my coffee cup rattled on the tray table. I grabbed it before it spilled, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe 4 years of psychological warfare had broken my ability to think rationally. Or maybe Cole Blackwood had increased my life insurance to $18 million, sent me on increasingly dangerous solo assignments, and then approved a vacation he'd been blocking for years, because he was planning for me not to return from one of those audits. And when that hadn't worked fast enough, he'd fired me instead. The plane started its descent into Logan just after 11 p.m. I'd been planning to take an Uber back to Brooklyn, to the townhouse I shared with Garrett, to unpack and shower and figure out my next steps. But sitting in the terminal with my carry-on and Wyatt's folder, staring at my phone as it reconnected to the network and messages started flooding in, I couldn't make myself do it. I couldn't walk back into that house. That marriage. That life. Not knowing what I knew now. I booked a room at the Marriott connected to the terminal. Checked in at midnight with my suitcase and my leather folder full of truths I couldn't unknow. The room was generic. Beige walls, industrial carpet, a bed that smelled like industrial detergent. I sat on the edge of it, still in my travel clothes, and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. Garrett. You land yet? We need to talk. Not I missed you. Not are you okay? Not welcome home. Just we need to talk, like I was a problem to be managed instead of a wife returning from vacation. I typed back, I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I'll come by tomorrow to get some things. His response came within seconds. Seriously? You're being dramatic. Dramatic. 4 years of invisible labor. An $18 million life insurance policy. A pattern of dangerous assignments timed to my successes. A firing during an approved vacation. And I was being dramatic. I turned off my phone, lay back on the stiff hotel pillows, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something close to clarity. Cole Blackwood had fired me. Maybe he tried to kill me. Either way, I was done playing by his rules. I slept badly that night, waking every hour to stare at the hotel ceiling and listen to the muffled sounds of travelers wheeling luggage past my door. By 6 a.m., I gave up and took a shower that was too hot. Standing under the scalding water until my skin turned pink, and I felt almost human. I needed clothes, toiletries, my laptop charger, the basics of existing, which meant going back to the townhouse. I arrived at 10 a.m., parking my rental car on the street because the driveway was full. 4 cars, Garrett's BMW, Cole's Range Rover, Diane's white Tesla, and Sloane's Audi. My stomach dropped. An intervention. I sat in the car for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel, debating whether to just drive away. But I needed my things, and some part of me, the part that had spent 4 years trying to prove my worth to these people, wanted to face them. The front door opened before I reached it. Garrett stood there in khakis and a button-down, arms crossed, expression tight and unreadable. "We've been waiting for you." Not "good morning." Not "how are you?" Just "we've been waiting," like I was late to a meeting I'd never agreed to attend. I stepped inside without responding. They were all assembled in the dining room, like a tribunal. Cole at the head of the table in his tailored suit, hands folded on the polished wood. Diane to his right, perfectly coiffed, pearls at her throat, wearing the practiced sympathy she deployed at charity events. Sloane tucked into the corner, looking miserable, dark circles under her eyes. Garrett gestured toward an empty chair. "Sit." I stayed standing. "I'm just here to get some clothes." "Sit down, Avery." Cole's voice had that edge of command he used in board meetings. The one that expected immediate obedience. I didn't move. He leaned back, studying me with those cold, gray eyes. "Did you enjoy your little tantrum in Greece?" "It wasn't a tantrum. It was a vacation. Approved in writing 4 months ago." He waved that away like it was irrelevant. "You abandoned your responsibilities. The Lansing contract is falling apart. Jordan couldn't handle what you left him. The Lansing contract was always going to fall apart, Cole. I told you that in a 12-page risk analysis. You ignored it." The room went very still. You didn't contradict Cole Blackwood. Not in his presence. Not in front of family. That was the first rule I'd learned when I married into this dynasty. Garrett's jaw clenched. He took a step toward me, voice low and tight. "Avery, you're a senior analyst, not the CFO. You don't get to question executive strategy." There was 4 years of subtext finally spoken out loud. I looked at him. This man I'd married, who'd promised we'd be partners, who'd said his family's company needed fresh perspectives and that together we'd build something meaningful. The man who'd slowly transformed into his father's echo. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not the CFO. I just do all the work of one for half the salary with 0 credit. My mistake was thinking that might actually matter to any of you." Diane's voice came from the table, sweet and sharp. "Avery, we've given you so much. A place in this family. Opportunities most people would be grateful for. Security. This ingratitude is really quite shocking." I laughed. The sound came out harsh and bitter. "Opportunities? Is that what you call working 70-hour weeks while being told I'm too emotional for leadership? Having my strategies presented to the board with other people's names on them?" I turned to look directly at Cole. "Or maybe you mean the opportunity to risk my life doing solo safety audits at facilities with broken equipment, right after you increased my life insurance policy to $18 million? Cole's expression went carefully blank. Too carefully. "That's standard executive coverage for high-value personnel. I'm not an executive. I'm a senior analyst. You've made that very clear." I crossed my arms. "And the timing is interesting. The increase was authorized 3 weeks after I saved the company $6 million in supplier negotiations. The same month you started sending me to dangerous facilities alone." Sloane stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Cole shot her a warning look. "Sloane, this doesn't concern you. Sit down." But Sloane was staring at me, her face pale. "Avery, what do you mean? What life insurance policy?" I pulled up my phone, opened the HR email I'd saved, and slid it across the table toward her. She picked it up, read it, and the color drained completely from her face. Garrett snatched the phone from her hand. "This is routine corporate policy. You're twisting it into something it's not. Then why wasn't anyone else's policy increased?" My voice was steady now, cold with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Why did the dangerous audits start right after? Why did I collapse from chemical fumes at Lexington? Why did the doctors find nothing wrong but tell me I needed a vacation? A vacation Cole had been blocking for 2 years until suddenly he couldn't approve it fast enough. The table had gone silent. I could see them processing, calculating. Diane's expression of practiced sympathy faltering into something harder. Garrett's defensive confusion warring with doubt. Sloane's dawning horror, as she looked from me to her father. Cole alone remained calm. Too calm. His fingers were still folded on the table, his posture relaxed, but his eyes had gone flat and dangerous. "You're being paranoid," he said. "4 years of stress have clearly taken a toll on your mental health. Don't." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Don't gaslight me. Not now. I've spent 4 years doubting my own instincts because you convinced me I was too emotional, too cautious, too small-minded. But I'm done with that." I pulled Wyatt's folder from my bag and dropped it on the table. Meridian Dynamics did an analysis of Blackwood Manufacturing's financial health. 9 contracts losing money. OSHA violations across 4 facilities. Workforce turnover double the industry standard. Cash flow projections showing insolvency within 18 months. I looked at Cole. "You're not building an empire. You're running a company into the ground. And I was the one holding it together while you took credit and planned for my convenient exit." Cole's mask finally cracked. His voice came out cold and lethal. "Where did you get that information? Does it matter? If you've been sharing confidential information with our competitors, everything in that folder is from public sources, industry reports, supplier networks, workforce data." I met his gaze. "You want to know what's really in there? The truth you've been hiding from your board, from your investors, from everyone." He stood slowly, both hands flat on the table. "You're fired, Avery. That hasn't changed." He slid a stack of papers toward me. "Separation agreement, non-disclosure, non-compete, covering 24 months and the entire industrial sector on the East Coast. Sign it, take your $60,000 severance, and disappear quietly." I picked up the papers. My hands were steady. Underneath the separation agreement were divorce documents. Garrett's signature already there, dated 3 days ago while I'd still been in Santorini. My chest went hollow. I looked at Garrett. "You filed for divorce while I was on vacation." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad said it was best to handle everything at once. Clean break. Everything at once. My job. My marriage. My entire life dismantled like a failed quarterly report." "You signed these 3 days ago," I said. "Before I even came home. Avery, you'd already decided. All of you." I looked around the table. "This isn't an intervention. This is an execution." Diane's voice was crisp. "We're giving you a generous severance. Most people in your position would be grateful." $60,000, I retorted, "for 4 years of CFO-level work while you pay actual executives 4 times that as a starting bonus." Cole's patience was gone. "You have 72 hours to sign. After that, we rescind the offer and make this very ugly for you. No severance. No recommendations. We'll make sure no one in this industry hires you." I picked up my purse, looked at Garrett one last time, at this man who'd promised to be my partner, and had instead become my warden. "You already made it ugly," I said. "You just didn't expect me to survive it." Sloane stood up. "Avery, wait." But I was already walking toward the stairs, toward the bedroom where I'd spent 4 years sleeping next to a man who'd stopped seeing me somewhere along the way. I packed quickly. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the few personal items that were actually mine. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. When I came back downstairs, they were still sitting at the table. Garrett had his head in his hands. Diane was speaking quietly to Cole. Sloane was staring at her phone. She looked up as I passed, eyes red. I paused, mouthed "I'm sorry," because she was the only one who never treated me like I was temporary. Then I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I loaded my bags into the rental car, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Sat in the driver's seat with the engine running, staring at the townhouse I'd never really belonged in. My phone buzzed. A text from Sloane. "I believe you. I'm so sorry. Please be safe." I typed back, "Thank you. You too." Then I pulled Wyatt's business card from my wallet, stared at it for a long moment, and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Avery, how are you?" "That job offer," I said. "Is it still available?" "Absolutely. When can you start? How soon can you get to New York?" Wyatt's voice came through the phone, calm and steady, like she'd been expecting this call. Like she knew exactly how the intervention would go before I'd even walked through the door. I was sitting in my rental car outside the Brooklyn townhouse, bags packed in the trunk, hands still shaking from confrontation adrenaline. I need to handle some things first, I said. Sign the separation papers. Find a lawyer. Figure out where I'm staying. Don't sign anything without legal review. Cole will bury traps in that contract. She paused. And you don't need to figure out housing. Meridian keeps corporate apartments in Hudson Yards for executives in transition. You can stay there as long as you need. My throat tightened. Wyatt, I haven't even officially accepted yet. You called me. That's acceptance enough. I could hear the smile in her voice. Take the weekend. Get your affairs in order. Monday morning 9 a.m. Come to Meridian. We'll make it official. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the house through the windshield. Then I put the car in drive and left Brooklyn behind. That night, I stayed at the Marriott again, spread the separation papers across the hotel desk next to Wyatt's business card, and tried to read through the legal language with exhausted eyes that kept blurring the text. Non-disclosure agreement. Standard enough. Non-compete clause, 24 months, entire industrial manufacturing sector, East Coast territory. $60,000 severance contingent on signing both. And underneath it all, the divorce papers with Garrett's signature already dry and legal. My phone buzzed. Sloan. Can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk to you, please. I stared at the message. Sloan had looked horrified during the intervention, but she'd also sat there silently while her father threatened me. While Garrett presented divorce papers he'd signed behind my back. But her text from earlier, I believe you, had felt genuine. I typed back, coffee, 10 a.m. Cambridge. Her response came immediately. Thank you? I barely slept. The hotel air conditioning cycled on and off with mechanical precision, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Cole's flat, dangerous expression when I'd mentioned the life insurance policy. By 9 a.m., I was showered and dressed, drinking bitter hotel coffee, and watching the minutes crawl toward 10 o'clock. The coffee shop was near Harvard Square, tucked into a side street where tourists didn't usually wander. I got there early, ordered a latte I didn't really want, and sat in a corner booth with my back to the wall. Sloan arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept either. She slid into the booth across from me, hands wrapped around a to-go cup she must have brought from somewhere else. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. You said you believe me. I do. She set down her cup, pulled out her phone, and her hands were shaking. Avery, I need you to listen to something. She tapped her screen, turned up the volume slightly, and pressed play. Cole's voice came through, muffled, but unmistakable. Insurance policy pays out to the company if something happens to her. 18 million. It solves our cash flow problem for the next 2 quarters while we restructure. Another voice, older, gravelly. And you're sure the audits won't raise flags? Frank, I've been running this company for 30 years. I know how to manage risk. As long as the facilities are documented as compliant after her visits, no one will question anything. What if she figures it out? She won't. She's too busy trying to prove herself to see what's right in front of her. The recording cut off. I sat there feeling like someone had dumped ice water over my head. Sloane's eyes were red-rimmed. I couldn't sleep after yesterday. I kept thinking about what you said, about the timing, about the audits. So around 2 o'clock in the morning, I went downstairs. Dad's study door was cracked open. He was on the phone. She swallowed hard. I recorded it through the door. My hands had gone numb. Sloan, I know what this means. I know what he was planning. Her voice cracked. Avery, I think my father tried to kill you. The words hung between us, stark and terrible. If you testify to this, I said carefully, if you give this recording to anyone official, Cole will destroy you. He'll cut you off. Turn the family against you. Make sure you have nothing. She laughed, and it came out bitter and broken. He's already destroyed me. Just slowly, over 26 years. Telling me I wasn't serious enough for business school, that art history was a cute hobby for someone who didn't have Garrett's discipline, that I should focus on finding a good husband instead of a career. She looked at me with fierce, desperate eyes. You were the only person in that house who ever asked about my work, who looked at my paintings like they mattered, who treated me like I had a brain instead of just a trust fund. Sloan, I can't let him do this to you. I won't. She pushed her phone across the table. Take it. Copy the recording. Use it however you need to. I stared at the phone. At this evidence that could bury Cole Blackwood, but would also detonate what was left of Sloane's family. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm done being quiet. I'm done pretending the people I love aren't monsters. I picked up the phone and forwarded the recording to myself, watched the progress bar fill and the confirmation appear. Then I reached across the table and gripped her hand. "Thank you," I said, "for believing me. For being brave enough to do this." She squeezed back. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not signing Cole's papers until I talk to a lawyer." That afternoon, I met with Patricia Strand in her office in downtown Boston. A corner suite with leather furniture and walls lined with law books and framed degrees from schools that mattered. She was maybe 55, silver hair cut sharp at her jawline, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the separation agreement I'd brought. She read in silence for 10 minutes, making occasional notes on a legal pad. Finally, she looked up. "This non-compete is unenforceable." I blinked. "What?" "You were terminated during approved leave time. That's retaliatory termination, which violates Massachusetts employment law. The non-compete clause is overly broad. 24 months covering an entire industry sector is unreasonable restriction of trade." She tapped the document. "If Cole tries to enforce this, we'll countersue for wrongful termination, and I'll make sure every detail comes out in discovery. The life insurance policy, the dangerous audits, the whole pattern." "So I can just ignore it?" "No. Sign it. Take the severance money. Let Cole think he's won." She smiled, sharp and knowing. "Then go work for Meridian Dynamics. When he inevitably tries to sue you for breach, we'll destroy him in court, and you'll probably end up with a much larger settlement." "And the divorce?" She flipped to those pages. "Uncontested. No fault. You're not asking for anything except to dissolve the marriage. Sign it. Move on. He's not worth fighting over." I signed everything that afternoon. Separation agreement, divorce papers, all of it. Patricia filed the documents while I sat in her office drinking water from a paper cup and feeling like I was shedding a skin I'd been trapped inside for 4 years. When I walked out of her building, the September air felt different, lighter. I drove to New York that evening. 3.5 hours down I-95, with my entire life packed into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, Sloane's recording backed up in 3 separate locations, and Wyatt's business card in my wallet. The corporate apartment was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Hudson Yards. 1 bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that was tasteful and temporary. It was twice the size of my office at Blackwood and felt like a palace. I stood at those windows on Sunday night, watching the city lights reflect off the Hudson River, the skyline stretching out in all directions like a promise I was finally allowed to believe in. My phone buzzed. "Wyatt. Ready for tomorrow?" I typed back, "Ready." Another message appeared. "Sloane. I told Mom and Dad I'm moving to New York. Dad didn't take it well, but I'm done living in that house. Thank you for showing me it's possible to leave." I smiled, feeling something warm and fierce bloom in my chest. "You're going to be okay," I typed. "We both are." Monday morning came with clear skies and cool air that smelled like possibility. I put on my best suit, navy blue, tailored, professional, and took the subway to Meridian's office in Midtown. The lobby was all glass and steel and living walls of greenery. The receptionist smiled when I gave my name. "Miss Hale. Miss Brennan is expecting you. 48th floor." The elevator rose through the building, and with each floor I felt lighter, more solid, more like myself. Wyatt was waiting in her corner office, windows overlooking Central Park, wearing a charcoal suit and that same confident smile from Santorini. "Welcome to Meridian," she said, extending her hand. I shook it, and her grip was firm and warm and real. "Thank you for the chance. Thank me by building something great." She gestured to a leather folder on her desk. "Contracts ready when you are. And Avery. Cole Blackwood is about to learn that firing you was the biggest mistake of his career." I picked up the pen, signed my name, and felt the last 4 years finally, truly end. My first day at Meridian, Wyatt walked me through the 48th floor, introducing me to people whose names I tried desperately to remember while my brain was still processing that I actually worked here now. "This is Avery Hale, our new CFO," she said at every stop. And people smiled and shook my hand and said things like, "We've heard great things, and excited to work with you." No one treated me like I was temporary. No one acted like I needed to prove I deserved to be there. It was disorienting. My office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Real windows. With natural light that changed throughout the day. I stood there that first afternoon, just staring at the water, at the boats moving past, at the sky that wasn't blocked by walls or cubicles or the weight of 4 years of invisible labor. The work itself was challenging, but collaborative. I spent the first week in budget meetings, reviewing Meridian's cost structures, identifying opportunities for efficiency without gutting departments or squeezing suppliers. People listened when I talked, asked questions that showed they'd actually read my analysis instead of just skimming the executive summary. Wyatt checked in daily, not to micromanage, but to make sure I had what I needed. "How are you settling in?" she asked on Friday afternoon, appearing in my doorway with 2 coffees. "It's good. Really good. Different from what I'm used to." I accepted the coffee. "Different how?" "People here seem to actually want me to succeed." She smiled, but there was something sad in it. "That's not different, Avery. That's normal. What you experienced at Blackwood was abuse dressed up as corporate culture." The word landed heavy. Abuse. I never let myself call it that before. By week 3, I built a preliminary budget for the new East Coast division, interviewed candidates for my finance team, and restructured supplier contracts that would save Meridian $2 million annually without burning bridges. I worked long hours, but they felt different. Purposeful instead of desperate. At 6 p.m., people started packing up and going home. No one sent emails at midnight expecting immediate responses. No one made me feel guilty for taking lunch breaks. At night, I'd walk along the Hudson River Greenway, phone silenced, breathing air that didn't taste like fear. Garrett texted twice in 3 weeks. First, need to know what furniture you want from the house. I typed back, keep it all. Second, divorce papers are final. Just need your signature on the asset division. I signed them in Patricia's office without reading closely and had them messengered back. Let him have the house, the furniture, the life we'd built that had never really been ours. Then, on a Thursday afternoon in my 4th week, flowers arrived. Wyatt's assistant brought them to my office. A striking arrangement of white peonies and black dahlias in a crystal vase. "These just came for you," she said, setting them on my desk. I pulled the card from its small envelope. "Congratulations on your career suicide. Forever watching, CB." My hands went cold. I walked the flowers straight to the break room and dumped them in the trash, vase and all. The glass shattered satisfyingly against the bin liner. Cole's just bitter, I told myself, just lashing out because I'd escaped. But my hands were still shaking when I got back to my office. The SEC investigator showed up the following Tuesday. I was in a budget review meeting when Wyatt's assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Avery, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." The man waiting in reception had tired eyes and a federal ID badge clipped to his belt. Mid-40s, cheap suit, the look of someone who'd seen too many corporate lies. "Miss Hale, I'm Martin Voss with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I need to speak with you about allegations that have been filed." My stomach dropped. "What kind of allegations?" "Securities fraud and theft of proprietary information." "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Patricia Strand arrived within 30 minutes of my call, striding into Meridian's conference room in a sharp suit and reading glasses, legal pad in hand. "My client won't be answering questions without counsel present," she said, sitting beside me. Voss nodded like he'd expected that. He slid a folder across the polished table. "Miss Hale, we're investigating a complaint filed by Blackwood Manufacturing alleging that you illegally accessed and transmitted confidential company information to Meridian Dynamics prior to your employment here." He opened the folder and showed me printed emails from avery.hale@blackwood.com to w.brennan@meridiandynamics.com. Date September 3rd. Subject confidential financial projections. The preview text showed financial data, client lists, contract details. My mouth went dry. I never sent these. Voss's expression didn't change. "According to Blackwood's ID department, these emails originated from your company account. The metadata shows they were sent from your IP address while you were still employed." "That's impossible. I never emailed Wyatt before I was fired. I met her in Santorini." Patricia put a hand on my arm. "We'll need to see the complete digital forensics. Email headers, server logs, authentication records, everything." Voss pulled out a notepad. "We're still gathering that information from Blackwood Systems. But Miss Hale, I need to ask, did you have any communication with Meridian Dynamics before your termination from Blackwood Manufacturing?" "No. I met Wyatt Brennan for the first time on September 18th in Santorini. Cole had already fired me by then." "And you didn't discuss Blackwood's business operations with her?" I hesitated. "We talked generally about the industry, but nothing proprietary, nothing I wouldn't discuss at any industry conference." Patricia made a note. "Agent Voss, my client is cooperating fully, but until we can examine the forensic evidence, she won't be making any further statements about these alleged emails." After Voss left, I sat in that conference room feeling like the air had been sucked out. Patricia was already on her phone. "I'm calling a digital forensics expert. If those emails are fabricated, the metadata will prove it." Wyatt came in, closed the door, pulled out the chair across from me. "This is Cole's move," she said quietly. "Fabricated evidence to destroy your credibility and hurt Meridian. What if he's good enough to make it stick? Email forensics don't lie, Avery. If he created these, the digital fingerprints will show it." She leaned forward. But I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything at all, that Cole could twist? Any emails, any conversations, any access to files that could be misinterpreted? I thought back through 4 years of work. Through every email I'd sent, every file I'd accessed, every conversation I'd had. Nothing. I never discussed Blackwood business with anyone outside the company. The only thing remotely close was our conversation in Santorini, and that was after I was fired. Wyatt nodded slowly. Then we fight. And we make sure Cole regrets starting this. But that night, alone in my corporate apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about those emails. About how real they'd looked. About Cole's resources and connections and his absolute certainty that he could destroy anyone who opposed him. My phone rang at 11 p.m. Sloan. I almost didn't answer. Avery, please. I need to see you now. Her voice was shaking. What's wrong? It's about Dad. About the SEC thing. I can't talk about this on the phone. Can you meet me? We met at a 24-hour diner in Chelsea, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting in the pot since dinner service. Sloan slid into the booth across from me, looking wrecked. Hair uncombed, mascara smudged, wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie like she'd left the house in a hurry. Are you okay? No. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands. I couldn't sleep tonight. I kept thinking about what he said at the townhouse, about Dad, about the emails the SEC mentioned. So I went to his study around midnight. The door was cracked open. She tapped her phone, pulled up a voice recording, turned the volume low. Listen. Cole's voice came through, muffled, but unmistakable. You're sure the emails look authentic? Another voice, older, nervous. Officer created them with administrator access. Backdated to early September. Used her IP address from when she was still working here. And the SEC won't detect the fabrication. Not without deep forensic analysis, which they won't do for a corporate espionage complaint. They'll see the emails, interview her, and even if they don't charge her, the investigation alone will destroy her reputation. Pause. She'll never work in this industry again. Cole's voice came back, cold and satisfied. Good. Make sure all the logs are clean. I don't want any trace leading back to us. The recording ended. I sat there feeling like someone had poured ice water through my veins. Sloane's eyes were red and swollen. He fabricated evidence. He's trying to frame you for a federal crime. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table. Sloane, if you give this to anyone, if you testify, your father will destroy you. I know. Her voice cracked. But I can't watch him do this. Not to you. Not to anyone. She pushed her phone across the table. Take it. Copy the file. Use it however you need to. I stared at that phone. At the evidence that could save me and detonate what was left of Sloane's family. Are you absolutely sure? She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. I'm done being afraid of him. I'm done pretending he's someone he's not. I picked up the phone, forwarded the recording to myself and Patricia and Wyatt, watched the file send and confirm. Then I reached across the table and gripped Sloane's hand. Thank you for being brave enough to do this. She squeezed back, and we sat there in that fluorescent-lit diner at midnight. Two women who'd escaped the same poison, holding on to each other while the evidence of Cole Blackwood's crimes lived in our phones like a loaded gun. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay in my corporate apartment staring at the ceiling. Sloane's recording playing on repeat in my mind. The investigation alone will destroy her reputation. She'll never work again. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and called Patricia. I have evidence, I said when she answered. Cole confessing to fabricating the emails, recorded by his daughter. Silence. Then, how soon can you get to my office? Patricia's office at 8 a.m. was already alive with purposeful energy. She had coffee brewing, her paralegal taking notes, and a digital forensics expert on video call within 15 minutes of my arrival. Sloane showed up at 8:30, looking exhausted, but determined. Patricia listened to the recording 4 times, her expression growing more severe with each playthrough. Finally, she sat down her phone and looked at both of us. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and wire fraud. All federal crimes. Cole Blackwood just confessed to fabricating evidence in an active SEC investigation. She turned to Sloane. You understand what this means? Testifying against your father will destroy your relationship with your family, possibly permanently. Sloane's hands were folded tight in her lap, knuckles white. I'm already estranged. They just don't know it yet. The only question is whether I do the right thing or keep being silent like I've done my whole life. Patricia nodded slowly. Then we move fast before Cole realizes what we have. The next week was a blur of documentation and preparation. I compiled everything, 4 years of performance reviews showing exemplary work. The termination email sent while I was on approved vacation. HR records of the life insurance increase dated 3 weeks after my supplier contract win. Safety audit assignments with dates that corresponded to every major financial contribution I made. Patricia hired a whistleblower protection attorney for Sloan. A woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in protecting witnesses in corporate fraud cases. Sloan gave a formal statement, had the recording authenticated by a digital forensics lab, signed affidavits about what she'd witnessed. I watched her do it with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. She was burning her family to the ground to save me. "Are you sure?" I asked her one afternoon in Patricia's conference room after she'd spent 3 hours being deposed by Rebecca. She looked at me with red-rimmed but clear eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything. What he did to you, what he was planning to do, it's evil. And I won't be part of it." We presented everything to the SEC on a Thursday morning. Patricia had scheduled a meeting with Martin Voss and his supervisor, an agent named Sandra Pierce, who had 25 years of experience, and the kind of sharp, assessing gaze that missed nothing. The SEC's New York field office was all security checkpoints and beige walls and the particular smell of government buildings everywhere. We sat in a windowless conference room, me, Patricia, Sloan, Rebecca, and the 2 SEC agents. Patricia laid out the case like she was prosecuting it herself. She started with the fabricated emails, showing the forensic analysis that proved they were created with administrator privileges weeks after I'd left Blackwood. Backdated to look authentic, sent from IP addresses I'd never accessed. Then she played Sloan's recording. Cole's voice filled the room, cold and calculating, discussing the fabrication like it was a routine business transaction. When it finished, Pierce's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. "Miss Hale, I owe you an apology. You were never the subject of this investigation. You were the victim." She looked at Sloan. "And Miss Blackwood, what you've done here took extraordinary courage. You're now a federal whistleblower, and we'll make sure you're protected." Voss was already on his phone. "I'm calling the U.S. Attorney's Office. We need arrest warrants drawn up today." Patricia pulled out another folder. "There's more. Evidence suggesting Cole increased Miss Hale's life insurance policy to $18 million, then systematically sent her on dangerous solo audits at facilities with safety violations. We believe this may constitute attempted harm or reckless endangerment." Pierce took the folder, scanned through it, and her expression darkened. "We'll need to investigate this further, but if the pattern holds..." She looked at me. "Miss Hale, your former father-in-law may be facing additional charges beyond evidence fabrication." The words hung in the air. Attempted harm. Someone finally saying out loud what I'd been too afraid to name. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office at Meridian reviewing quarterly projections when Wyatt appeared in my doorway, face serious. "Turn on the news." I pulled up CNBC on my computer. The headline was already scrolling. "Breaking, Industrial CEO arrested on federal fraud charges." The footage showed Cole being walked out of Blackwood Manufacturing headquarters in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. Behind him, through the glass walls, I could see employees standing frozen at their desks, watching their CEO being taken away. The news anchor's voice provided narration. "Cole Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Manufacturing, has been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and wire fraud. These charges stem from allegations that Blackwood fabricated evidence in an SEC investigation targeting a former employee. If convicted on all counts, he faces up to 20 years in federal prison." My phone started buzzing immediately. Reporters, former colleagues, people I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly wanting statements. One voicemail from Diane, Cole's wife, her voice dripping venom. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're proud of yourself, you ungrateful." I deleted it without listening to the rest. Another message, this one from someone at Blackwood's board. "We'd like to discuss the circumstances of your departure." I forwarded that one to Patricia. The only call I answered was from Sloan. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No." Her voice was thick. "But I did the right thing. I know I did." "You did. You absolutely did. Mom won't talk to me. Garrett called me a traitor. Dad's lawyer is trying to claim I fabricated the recording." She laughed, bitter and broken. "But I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times." The trial lasted 4 weeks. I didn't attend. Patricia said I didn't need to. My deposition and documentation were entered as evidence, and my presence in the courtroom might turn media attention on me instead of on Cole's crimes. But Patricia sent me daily updates. Sloan testified for 6 hours over 2 days. Patricia said she was extraordinary, calm, detailed, unflinching. She walked the jury through years of watching her father manipulate people, treat employees as disposable assets, prioritize profit over safety and ethics. When the prosecutor played her recording, the courtroom went silent. Neil Garson, Blackwood's IT director, had taken a plea deal early and testified against Cole. He confirmed under oath that he'd fabricated the emails at Cole's direct instruction, using administrator access to create false evidence that was then presented to federal investigators. The forensic evidence was damning: metadata that showed creation dates weeks after my termination. Server logs that proved the emails never actually traversed any network. Digital fingerprints that tied everything back to Blackwood's ID systems. The defense tried to argue entrapment, claiming Sloan had manipulated the conversation, but the recording was too clear, too damning, and Cole's own words sealed his fate. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. I was in a budget meeting when Patricia called with the verdict. I excused myself, walked to my office, closed the door, and just stood at the window looking out at the Hudson River. Guilty. Cole Blackwood, the man who dangled promotions I'd never received, who'd taken credit for my work, who'd increased my life insurance and sent me into dangerous facilities, who'd fired me for taking a vacation and then tried to frame me for federal crimes, was guilty. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 18 to 22 years in federal prison. I watched the news coverage from my apartment that evening, glass of wine in hand, sitting on my couch in the corporate housing that had somehow started feeling like home. The reporter stood outside the courthouse. Cole Blackwood, once a titan of the manufacturing industry, will spend nearly 2 decades in federal prison. The judge cited the severity of fabricating evidence and attempting to destroy a former employee's career as factors in the sentencing. They showed footage of Cole being led away, his expensive suit rumpled, his face no longer red with rage, but ashen with shock. Garrett appeared briefly in the coverage, stone-faced, declining to comment. My phone buzzed. Sloan. It's over. He's really going to prison. I typed back, how are you feeling? Her response took a minute. Empty. Relieved. Said all of it at once. Me too, I sent. And it was true. I'd won. Cole was in prison. My name was cleared. Meridian had stood by me through everything. But victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like ash and endings and the hollow satisfaction of watching someone destroy themselves while you stood at a safe distance. I finished my wine, set down the glass, and looked around my apartment, at the life I was building, at the city lights beyond my windows, at the future that was finally truly mine. Cole Blackwood had tried to erase me. Instead, I'd erased him. The wheel had turned. Justice had been served. And somehow it still felt like I'd lost something I couldn't name. The hollow feeling didn't go away. I thought it would. Thought that watching Cole get sentenced, seeing justice actually work for once, would bring some kind of closure that felt satisfying instead of just empty. But 3 weeks after the sentencing, I was still going through the motions. Working long days at Meridian, walking home along the Hudson, eating takeout in my corporate apartment, while the city glittered outside my windows like a promise I'd forgotten how to believe in. Wyatt noticed. You're doing excellent work, she said one afternoon in my office. But you look like you're running on fumes. When's the last time you took a day off? I couldn't remember. Take the weekend, she said. Actually, take it. Don't check email. Don't think about budgets. Just exist for 48 hours. So I did. I spent Saturday walking through Central Park, watching families and couples and people who seemed to know how to be happy. Bought coffee from a cart vendor and sat on a bench by the lake, letting the October sun warm my face. Sunday morning, I was having coffee in my apartment when my phone rang. Wyatt. I'm sorry to call on your weekend, but there's something I need to discuss with you. Can we meet tomorrow? My stomach tightened reflexively. Is something wrong? No, the opposite, actually. But we should talk in person. Monday morning, she was waiting in her office with coffee and that same calm presence that had made me trust her on a Santorini terrace 6 months ago. Blackwood Manufacturing filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, she said without preamble. It was announced this morning. I set down my coffee. The filing went through over the weekend. They're liquidating assets to satisfy creditors. She pulled up something on her tablet, turned it toward me. Their precision equipment division is being sold. It's the only profitable piece of the company. Strong workforce, solid contracts, good equipment. Worth about $65 million as a going concern. I could see where this was going. You want to acquire it? I want Meridian to acquire it, but only if you're comfortable with that. She set down the tablet. Avery, I know this is complicated. That was your workplace for 4 years. But Cole's in prison. The board forced Garrett to resign. The company is being dismantled by bankruptcy trustees who just want to maximize value for creditors. And you want me to lead the acquisition. You know that division better than anyone. You know the contracts, the workforce, the operations. If we're going to do this, I need your expertise. She paused. But if it's too much, if it feels like we're picking over bones, we can walk away. There are other opportunities. I looked out her window at the Manhattan skyline, at the city that had become my refuge. 200 people worked in that division. Good people who'd just been trying to do their jobs while Cole played power games with their livelihoods. What are you offering them? I asked. Full employment guarantees. No layoffs. No restructuring that cuts staff. We integrate them into Meridian with their current salaries and benefits intact. Wyatt leaned forward. I'm not interested in gutting a company for parts, Avery. I want to build something sustainable. But I need to know the numbers work. I thought about Jordan, the junior analyst I'd trained. About Margaret in HR. About the line workers and technicians and project managers who never had a say in Cole's destructive decisions. I'll do it, I said. But I want it in writing that we're protecting jobs. This can't be a cost-cutting exercise disguised as an acquisition. Wyatt smiled. Already drafted. Patricia reviewed the terms this morning. The next 2 weeks were brutal. I led the due diligence team, financial analysts, operations specialists, legal counsel, through every aspect of Blackwood's precision equipment division. We reviewed contracts, assessed equipment value, interviewed key employees who were terrified they'd lose their jobs in the bankruptcy. It was strange being back in Blackwood's world, even at arm's length. I recognized names in the employee roster. Jordan, who'd been promoted to full analyst after I left. Margaret, still running HR after 24 years. Technicians and line workers I'd seen during those dangerous facility audits. People who just nodded hello and gone back to work, unaware that their CEO was using my visits as cover for something darker. The numbers told a clear story. The division was profitable, well run at the operational level, dragged down only by Cole's reckless corporate strategy and the bankruptcy of the parent company. In a normal sale, it would be worth $65 million. In bankruptcy liquidation with creditors pushing for fast resolution, we could get it for $42 million. Wyatt presented the acquisition to Meridian's board on a Thursday afternoon. I sat beside her, walking them through the financial analysis, the integration timeline, the employment guarantees. The board voted unanimously to approve. We submitted our bid that Friday, $42 million, full employment protection, 90-day integration period. 3 weeks later, the bankruptcy court accepted our offer. Blackwood Manufacturing's most valuable asset, the division I'd helped build with 4 years of invisible labor, was now part of Meridian Dynamics. The night the deal closed, I was in my apartment finishing paperwork when my phone buzzed. Sloan. I saw the news about the acquisition. You saved 200 jobs. Thank you for that. I typed back, how are you doing? Better. I moved to New York last month. Working at a gallery in Chelsea. Trying to figure out who I am when I'm not a Blackwood. Want to get coffee this weekend? I'd love that. We met at a small cafe in the West Village on Saturday afternoon. Sloan walked in looking completely different. Hair cut short and dyed auburn, wearing jeans and a vintage leather jacket. No trace of the careful polish the Blackwood family required. She looked lighter, younger, free. You look good, I said as she slid into the seat across from me. I feel like I'm becoming a real person. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Mom won't talk to me. Garrett sends occasional texts asking if I'm okay, but he won't meet in person. Dad's attorney tried to get me to recant my testimony. Said I'd been manipulated. She rolled her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. I chose this. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Are you happy, Avery? Really happy? I thought about that question. About the work I was doing, the team I was building, the apartment that had stopped feeling temporary. Getting there, I said. One day at a time. Me too. She looked out the window at people passing by. I keep thinking about what you said that day at the townhouse, about how they saw your value, but didn't want to pay for it. That's been true my entire life. They saw me, but only as decoration, as someone to marry off strategically, or trot out at charity events. What are you going to do now? I'm taking art classes at SVA. Painting again. The gallery job doesn't pay much, but I don't need money. I have my trust fund, and unlike Dad, I can't take that away. She smiled, a real smile this time. I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience. We sat there for 2 hours, talking about New York and art, and the strange relief of starting over. When we finally left, she hugged me tight on the sidewalk. Thank you, she said, for showing me it was possible to leave. You did that yourself. We did it together. Walking home through the village as afternoon turned to evening, I thought about everything that had happened in 6 months. Cole was in federal prison in Pennsylvania, appeals denied, facing 18 years behind bars. Blackwood Manufacturing had collapsed under the weight of his ego and fraud, liquidated in bankruptcy. Garrett had fled to Portland, trying to escape the family name. Diane had retreated into bitter silence. And I was the CFO of a growing company, living in a city I loved, with a bank account that proved my worth in numbers Cole could never manipulate. I'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like I'd been drowning for 4 years and finally reached the surface. Gasping and exhausted, grateful to be alive, but not quite sure what to do with the air in my lungs. That evening, I stood at my apartment window watching the sun set over the Hudson, the sky turning shades of orange and pink that reminded me of Santorini. My phone buzzed. A message from Wyatt. Integration meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You did incredible work on this acquisition. Thank you? I smiled. Typed back, thank you for believing in me. Her response came quickly. You made it easy. I set down my phone and looked around my apartment, at the furniture I'd chosen, the books on the shelf, the life I was building that belonged only to me. Cole Blackwood had tried to erase me. He'd fired me, framed me, maybe even tried to kill me, and instead I'd survived, built something better, turned his weapons into my armor. I thought about revenge, about what it's supposed to feel like when the villain finally falls. The movies make it look triumphant, satisfying, clean. But real revenge is messy. It's watching someone destroy themselves while you stand at a safe distance. It's winning, but still feeling the weight of everything you lost along the way. It's building a new life and realizing the old one left scars that don't just disappear because justice was served. But standing there in my apartment, with the city lights beginning to glow, and the evening air cooling through my open window, I realized something else. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better from the ashes. It's walking away free. And it's waking up every morning and choosing yourself over the people who tried to make you small. Cole had wanted me to disappear. Instead, I'd made him irrelevant. And that finally, slowly, painfully, was starting to feel like enough. So if this story of strategic justice and finding your voice resonated with you even a little, hit that like button right now. What was the moment that made your jaw drop? Let me know in the comments below. And don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.